Okay, this is interesting. So, induced phobias. Fears are instilled which are either imaginary, based on real or exaggerated consequences, or on artificial effects created from group pressures. So, in a religious context, you may have fear of hell or of damnation, or you may have exaggerated consequences. If you leave us or if you start having a beer on Friday nights, then you're going to turn into a raging alcoholic and you're going to destroy your life. All these things are overblown or created fears that are designed to keep people within the group and believing and acting according to group dictates. How much of a role did this play?
It's a big role. So they basically, the idea that everyone in society who isn't trans is transphobic creates this sort of feeling where you're scared of literally everybody who's not trans. And they keep that going by really emphasizing everything that goes wrong for trans people. So they have Trans Day of Remembrance, where people are getting together and remembering all of the trans people that have been either murdered or committed suicide that year. And they'll just read down the list of all of these names. And there's a website that sort of goes through each of their stories. So there's that day where we're remembering how horrible everybody is to trans people. And in the wake of that, especially in like the last few years when there's been more legal challenges to medicalization and everything, on social media, there's a lot of people, a lot of activists now that are claiming that we're at the beginning of a trans genocide. And they believe that basically the government is going to come, pull them from their houses, force them to detransition, take them off of medicine, basically everything like that. So that's where we're at right now, is it's this constant level of fear that something is going to be taken away from you, that you're going to be forced to do something that you don't want to do. Yeah, no, it's pretty constant.
I wasn't expecting that perspective on it. I think as an outsider, a lot of what you hear in phobia induction in terms of if you don't allow your child who's questioning their gender to transition, then they're going to commit suicide. So it creates this fear based on that, but that's a total different realm. What you're talking about seems a lot more akin to if you listen to something like the sermons of David Koresh. When all that happened, there was this fear about the government constantly trying to infringe upon the rights. You can listen to other far right political activists that talk about government planning to turn to communism, or far left people talking about the government turning to fascism, and that constant fear about these shadowy forces drives people's need to continue to be on the good side and be a part of the thing. The element of trans suicides, how is that used, if it is for fear within the group itself?
Why do parents go along with this? Many simply do not know that without affirmation, most gender dysphoric children will desist. The suppression of high-quality research and the reification of identities within left-wing politics mean they think they are doing the right thing. Any doubts are quelled by an oft-repeated claim that gender dysphoric children face a choice of transition or suicide. When you have the top clinicians saying that if you don't take the affirmative approach, you're going to kill your kid, says Denise, the founder of Fourth Wave Now, well, it's the worst thing that could happen. And to think that you could be responsible for it. Horrifying statistics are thrown around without context. Once you search for sources, they fall apart. Take, for example, an endlessly repeated figure of 48% for the share of young trans people who have attempted suicide. It turns out to be based on the responses of 27 British trans people in a larger survey promoted on LGBT websites. Not only is the number of respondents tiny, but there is no reason to think they are typical. If you want to find out something about a whole population, you must construct a representative sample. In an article in 2017 for Fourth Wave Now's website, Ray Blanchard and Michael Bailey debunked the transition or death narrative. Although suicide is somewhat more common among gender dysphoric people than the general population, they write, it is still very rare. And that elevated risk can be explained by gender dysphoria co-occurring with other mental health conditions such as eating disorders and depression. There is no evidence that these are caused by dysphoria, or that transitioning will resolve them and make suicide less likely. Scrolling through posts in a closed Facebook group for parents taking the gender affirmative approach with their children, the importance of the transition or death narrative is clear to see. If a newcomer expresses doubts, old hands immediately intervene to say that they must affirm their child's gender to stop them killing themselves.
I think that's also another pressure that pushes people towards medicalization is that that repeated idea that transition is life-saving. And that is definitely something that made me move forward, is that idea that if I don't transition, then I'm never going to live my life the way that I was meant to live my life. And I had suicidal ideation before I transitioned. So there was that feeling that, oh, maybe that this is what's causing it. But yeah, no, that is also a really big part of it, is not even just the constant feeling that other people are going to hurt you, but also that constant feeling that if you don't get what you want, you might hurt yourself. Yeah.
Is there any other dimension where you saw fear play out in how the community ordered the proper ways of thinking and acting?
There was also the public shaming. So there's that constant low-level fear that you're going to be the next. You're going to be next. Basically, if you do the wrong thing, if you say the wrong thing, then you might be the next person that they end up publicly shaming. So that is one of the ways that fear is used to control. And maybe this is true for a lot of cults, but I don't think that they even consciously realize that they're doing that. Maybe not even just cults, but just like in regular relationships, I don't think people realize that they're controlling with fear. I think they see it from a different angle. They see that it's a way of doing justice rather than a way of manipulating people.
Yeah. And it may be one of those things that just plays on some evolutionary reality that our brains operate that way. There's these videos where the person is trying to get a dog to take a pill, and so they try to force a puppet dog to take the pill, and the puppet dog refuses, and so they beat the puppet dog's head while the other dog is watching, and then they go and they try to give it to the dog, and the dog takes it right away because they've learned what happens to the other one.
Sit! Sit! Good boy. Good boy. Axel, come here.
I think there's another video where the same thing's happening for a kid, and they're pretending to give the medicine to a dolly, and the doll doesn't, and so they smack the dolly, and then the kid takes the medicine right away because they don't want to get smacked like they just saw.
Yeah.
What's he doing?
No. Say no. No.
So we understand negative consequences for behavior, and that does have an influence on the choices that we make, and that can play out in social media just like it could play out in a laboratory setting.
Yeah.
All right, so that's some interesting factors to think about regarding how induced phobias may play out in that realm. How do you want to rate it?
I'd say intense.
Okay.